So, what is this, exactly? A little scrapbook you carry around to feel important? Captain Darren Hollis held the worn leather case up by 2 fingers, the way a man holds something he considers beneath contempt. He had the build of someone who had never stopped believing the base was his personal theater. And right now, he was performing. Behind him, 22 officers stood in the open briefing corridor of Naval Station Pearl Harbor, morning sun cutting hard angles across the tile floor. They were watching. He needed them to. The words cut through the corridor like a blade scraping metal, and for a moment, nothing moved. She was 31 years old. Average height. Average build. The kind of appearance that made eyes slide right past her without sticking. Plain working uniform. No rank insignia beyond what the base visitor's pass required. Dark hair regulation pulled. A face that gave precisely nothing away. Her name on the temporary access badge read Vasquez. M. Her hands were still resting on the portable diagnostic panel she had been running when the captain appeared, and they had not moved. Not 1 millimeter. The metal case sat on the edge of the panel beside her tools. It was old. The leather had the specific patina of something that had been opened and closed 10,000 times, in vehicles, in forward operating bases, in rooms that smelled like blood and cordite and institutional cleaning fluid. Nothing about it was decorative. Everything about it was real. She did not look up. Not a scrapbook, she said. Quiet, 6 words. The captain's eyebrows rose in theatrical surprise, performing the gesture for the audience behind him. She speaks. Do we know what her clearance level actually is? Because I'd love to understand what a civilian contractor with a feelings box thinks she's doing in my briefing corridor at 0700. He stepped closer. His shadow fell across her workspace. His chest ribbons, 2 rows, earned and displayed, caught the morning light as he adjusted his posture into something that communicated authority without requiring him to claim it aloud. He was the kind of man used to being obeyed. From the far end of the corridor, a man named Chief Warrant Officer Garrett Ames watched through eyes that had been looking at military personnel for 37 years. He was 61, short-haired, with the specific stillness of a man who had been present at enough threshold moments to recognize when he was standing at another one. He held a clipboard he had not added a single mark to in the past 4 minutes. His jaw was set in that particular way, not tight, not loose, but held, like a man deciding whether to speak. He noticed something. He always noticed something. But this was not the time for it. She set down her calibration tool. Deliberately, the sound was precise against the panel surface, not careless, not aggressive. Placed. Then she looked up at Captain Hollis for the first time, and she looked at him the way a person looks at an equation they already solved 3 minutes ago. Higher than yours, sir, she said. You just don't know it yet. Somewhere behind the captain, someone exhaled a short, surprised sound, immediately suppressed. The captain's face moved through 3 expressions faster than he could control them. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that invites everyone else to join in. Right, he said. Sure, he turned to the men behind him, letting them see his amusement, confirming that she was a joke they were all sharing. Tech support girl says her clearance outranks mine. Let's put that in the official record. A few sounds of accommodating laughter from the back of the group. He turned back to her. Where did you get a metal case like that, sweetheart? Goodwill? A military surplus store? Or is your father's name on something in there, and you think proximity counts as accomplishment? She was already looking at the diagnostic panel again. Her hands moved with the angle of wrist and spacing of fingers that Chief Warrant Officer Ames, 37 feet away, did not move, but something in his face shifted. Belonged to a school of training that most people in this corridor had never heard of and wouldn't recognize on a list. She controls her breathing. 4 counts in, hold 4. 4 counts out, hold 4. She returned to work. The captain stared at the back of her head for 3 full seconds. Then he took the metal case and dropped it on the far end of the diagnostic panel, away from her reach. "I'll hold this for you," he said, "until we figure out what it actually is. Standard security measure." He looked at the men behind him. Protocol. She did not chase it. She did not flinch. She did not say a word. Ames's pen stopped moving entirely. The afternoon brings new indignities. By 1200, the story had traveled through the mess hall, through 2 group chats, and into the informal feedback loop of the base's junior officer network, in the particular way that base gossip travels. Fast, embellished, directional. In the embellished version, she had claimed she was a decorated SEAL. In another version, she had tried to show the captain a Medal of Honor that clearly wasn't hers. In the version closest to the truth, which was therefore the least interesting, she had said 7 quiet words to his face, and then gone back to work. She sat alone in the mess hall and ate a meal that tasted like institutional efficiency. She was listening, filing patterns. Who deferred to whom? Where the real power flowed beneath the official hierarchy. 3 tables away, a lieutenant commander spoke in a lowered voice about an access protocol change that had not been formally announced. 2 tables to her left, a pair of supply officers discussed a discrepancy in ordnance records that didn't match any official transfer. She noted it all and showed nothing on her face. She was doing intelligence work while appearing to be an isolated target. At 1400, a PO2 brought her a temporary access credential renewal request and a politely worded instruction that her diagnostic work would need to be paused pending a routine clearance review. Standard protocol language. Non-threatening on its surface. She signed where indicated. By 1530, the review had been assigned to Lieutenant Torres, a lean man with an administrative thoroughness that he used the way some men use height, as a method of making people feel small. He sat across from her in a windowless room off the administrative wing and placed a digital recorder between them with the precise placement of a man who understood the symbolic weight of documentation. "What were you doing at 0500? "System diagnostics." "Why at 0500? "Light traffic. Better performance data." "What systems?" "The 3 flagged in my work order." Torres looked at her across the table. "Your file lists you as a civilian contractor with NAVSEA. Level 2 access." She waited. "The systems you ran diagnostics on this morning require Level 4 clearance at minimum." She waited. "Can you explain the discrepancy?" She looked at him with the patience of someone who has answered 100 questions like this in rooms that smelled much worse than bureaucratic fluorescence. "No," she said. His pen stopped on the page. "No? The explanation involves information above your current clearance level." A pause. "Sir." Torres stared at her. He wrote something. He did not look like a man who was comfortable with uncertainty, and he was currently surrounded by it. She controls her breathing. 4 counts in, hold 4. 4 counts out, hold 4. By 1600, she was back at her temporary quarters, a transient billeting room, with a metal cot and a window that offered a view of the maintenance yard. She sat on the cot and removed her watch and looked at the time display for 6 seconds. The watch was not regulation. It was the kind of watch that receives encrypted burst transmissions on a frequency not assigned to civilian contractors. It was the kind of watch that nobody had thought to confiscate. She placed it back on her wrist. The next morning brought Captain Hollis. He had done the math, or had someone do it for him, and the math had produced an answer he didn't like. Not because it was incorrect, but because it implied she might be exactly what she said, which meant he had performed his theater in front of 22 officers, in front of someone who had the authority to document every word. So he escalated. He appeared in the transient billeting hallway at 0730 with 2 military police MPs and a printed credential revocation form. The MPs looked uncomfortable in the specific way that military police look when they're executing orders they're not certain should have been given. Vasquez. He did not use a rank prefix. This was intentional. We're going to need your base access card, your work order documents, and any materials you've collected during your time on base. There are questions about the legitimacy of your contractor credentials. She stood in the doorway and looked at the form. Then she looked at him. You've revoked my access. Pending investigation. Then, I'm not required to be anywhere else right now. He smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. No, you're required to be in the security holding facility while we run verification. Shouldn't take more than a few hours. Just standard protocol. Chief Warrant Officer Ames was at the end of the hallway. He had not been invited, but 37 years of service had given him the institutional memory to know when something was happening that he needed to see. His clipboard was in his hand. His pen had not moved. His eyes tracked from the captain's performance to the woman in the doorway, and his face did a careful thing. The way a man's face moves when he is computing something he doesn't yet want to say aloud. She stepped into the hallway. All right, she said. 2 words. She did not look at Ames. The holding facility was a concrete room with walls that were not quite painted, and a metal bench that was not quite warm, and a window near the ceiling that showed only sky. The smell was disinfectant working hard against something older. The specific institutional smell of rooms where people have waited against their will for a long time. She sat on the metal bench and did not move for 11 minutes. Then she looked at her watch. This is the near-fail moment. The point where anyone watching from the outside would think she's finished. Caught, credentials pulled. Held in a concrete box while a captain with a theater problem builds a file against her. Game over. Except games have rules, and she's about to show them they've been playing the wrong game entirely. Her watch read 0812. In 23 minutes, she had not checked into the secure communication protocol she was required to check into every 6 hours. Automated flag. In 59 minutes, a secondary protocol she had filed with a specific office in the Pentagon 14 weeks ago would activate without her manual override. A protocol that described exactly what to do if an operator went unreachable on a specific type of assignment. In approximately 2 hours and 17 minutes, Captain Darren Hollis was going to learn the difference between the rank you wear on your chest and the authority you carry in rooms that don't appear on any base map. She had not thought of the metal case since he took it. It was his problem now. His problem, and anyone else who looked at what was inside it. She controls her breathing. 4 counts in, hold 4. 4 counts out, hold 4. She waited. At 0847, the door of the holding facility opened, and a young petty officer leaned in with the look of a man who had just been handed information he didn't know how to process. Ma'am. He used that word, which was the first time anyone on this base had. He stopped. There's a situation. She stood. The first indication something had changed was outside in the corridor, where Lieutenant Torres was standing absolutely still with a piece of paper in his hand, looking at it the way a person looks at a document that has reorganized everything they thought they understood. He looked up when she came through the door, and his face did something she had seen on 100 faces across a dozen different theaters of operation. The specific recalibration of a man who has just realized the ground he was standing on is not the ground he thought it was. At the far end of the admin corridor, Chief Warrant Officer Ames was already there. He had not brought his clipboard this time. "You'd want to be very careful here," he said, and he was not speaking to her. He was speaking to Torres, to the two MPs who had escorted her back, to the general atmosphere of the hallway. Very careful. His voice was the voice of a man 61 years old who had served in places that were not discussed in polite administrative corridors. And when men like that said words like that in that tone of voice, people with operational sense listened. Torres looked at him. "Warrant officer, I'm just saying." Ames looked at her. Something in his face, not performed, not theatrical, but genuinely old and genuine and chosen, settled. "I'm just saying I've been in the service 37 years, and I know what I'm looking at. I knew it the first morning." She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she nodded once. He nodded back. The sound came from outside. The specific sound of multiple vehicles arriving in coordinated precision. The sound of doors. The sound of footsteps on pavement that had a particular pace, not rushed, not casual, but purposeful in the way that suggested whoever was walking knew exactly what they were walking into and had no uncertainty about their authority to be there. 4 senior officers in full service dress came through the main admin entrance. Behind them, 2 figures in suits who did not carry the posture of military personnel, federal, with a specific economy of movement, of people whose authority did not require visible insignia. The most senior officer present, a rear admiral named Whitmore, who had the face of a man who had stopped being surprised by things a long time ago, held a sealed portfolio with a classification stamp on its exterior that made the PO2 near the desk look at it, and then look away. The rear admiral looked down the hallway. His eyes found her without searching. Captain Hollis appeared from the briefing suite entrance, drawn by the sound of vehicles, by the presence of rank, by the operational instinct that told him something significant was happening on his base without his knowledge or consent. He came into the corridor and stopped when he saw the rear admiral, and the correct instinct would have been to stand down. But he had been wrong about the correct instinct all morning, and he wasn't done yet. "Admiral Whitmore," he said, "I don't know what brought you out here, but we have an ongoing security investigation, we know," the admiral said. He did not look at Hollis. He was still looking at her. The contractor's credentials, Captain the Admiral's voice dropped to a register that was not raised, not dramatic, just final. "I'm going to need you to stop talking for a moment." Hollis stopped talking. The room had already begun to change. The 2 MPs had taken a small, involuntary step backward. Torres had placed his piece of paper on the nearest surface and appeared to have no intention of picking it up again. The PO2 near the desk was very still. The rear admiral opened the portfolio. He removed something from it, a document. Single page, heavy stock, classification header across the top in the red-bordered format that belonged to a tier of authorization that most of the people in this building had clearance levels too low to confirm even existed. He did not hold it up. He simply looked at it. And then he looked at Hollis. "What you have done this morning," the admiral said, "constitutes interference with an active classified operation. The contractor designation was a cover credential. It was meant to protect the integrity of an ongoing assignment." He paused. "And you pulled it." Hollis opened his mouth. "In front of witnesses," the admiral said, "with documentation." The silence that followed was not quiet. Silence never is in these rooms. A boot scuffed tile somewhere behind the MPs. A chair scraped concrete from the direction of the briefing suite. The air conditioning, which had been a background constant since the morning, suddenly seemed very loud. One of the federal agents moved to the table where the confiscated materials had been staged, the work order documents, the diagnostic equipment, the access badge, and the metal case. He picked it up and held it toward her. She took it without ceremony and opened it. Chief Warrant Officer Ames, standing at the end of the corridor, looked at what was inside the case from 30 feet away, and he went still in a different way than before. Not watchful stillness, but the stillness of a man who has just seen a name he recognizes, a designation he recognizes, and a series of ribbons he knows the exact histories of, and everything he has been quietly computing for 37 hours has just resolved into an answer that he already knew, but needed to confirm. Something happened to his face. Just for a heartbeat. Then it was gone, replaced by the expression of a man who has decided what to do. His hand came up in a salute. It was not a routine salute. It was the kind of salute that cost something, deliberate, precise, from a man who chose it from knowledge and not from hierarchy or command. He held it for 3 full seconds. The room detonated. Gasps, actual audible gasps, from multiple personnel. Torres dropped the piece of paper he had just picked up. The clatter of his pen hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot in the stunned silence. The PO2 made a sound he would spend the next week trying to forget. The Rear Admiral raised his hand. He looked at her with the formal gravity of a man reading from a document he had read many times before. "Commander Marguerite Vasquez," he said aloud, for the record, in front of everyone present in that corridor. "United States Navy SEAL Command. Classification Red. 7 deployments across 4 active theaters. She holds the designation that 9 people in the United States military hold." He did not list the missions. He did not need to. The case in her hands held what was inside it, and the people in the room who had enough service years to recognize what they were looking at had already gone pale. Every person in this building, including myself, answers to her authority on matters within her operational scope. The salute from Ames was still in the air when the most senior of the 4 officers matched it. Then the second. Then the third. Then the fourth. 4 salutes in the corridor of the Pearl Harbor Admin Wing. Precise, formal, held, while the AC hummed and a boot scuffed tile, and 22 officers and 3 administrative personnel stood in the specific silence of people whose understanding of the last 24 hours had been structurally rebuilt in under 4 minutes. Captain Hollis did not move. His face cycled through surprise and through something that might have been denial and arrived at something that looked genuinely like fear. Not theatrical fear. The other kind. The kind a man feels when he understands that the mistake he made was not recoverable by force of personality or rank or theater. "Captain Hollis," the Rear Admiral said. The tone was flat. "Official. You're relieved pending formal review. Lieutenant Commander Michaels will assume your duties." He looked at the federal agents. Not a gesture, just a look. They moved. There was no scene, no raised voices, no drama. Hollis was escorted from the corridor with the quiet institutional efficiency of consequences arriving on schedule, and the door at the end of the hallway closed, and the corridor was left with everyone who remained. She was already looking at her watch. She controls her breathing. 4 counts in, hold 4. 4 counts out, hold 4. By 1900, the base was quiet in the way that military installations go quiet when something significant has happened, and the people inside them are still processing it. The administrative wing held the specific stillness of a place that has recently been the location of something it did not expect. She stood on a narrow maintenance access walkway on the eastern edge of the admin building, alone, and watched the Hawaiian sky do what it does at 1900 in July. turn a color between orange and something deeper than orange, with a specific layering of purple that appears only for about 11 minutes before dark takes over. The ocean below the base's outer fence was a flat gray-green at this light. Palms moved in the specific way palms move when the wind coming in from the water is gentle and warm and indifferent to everything humans have done in the buildings beside it. Her watch read 1903. She opened the metal case one more time. She did not look at it the way someone looks at a trophy. She looked at it the way a person looks at a record. A ledger of costs and corresponding debts, all of them settled in rooms that do not appear on official calendars. They laughed at the case. They forgot that every ribbon in it was purchased with a silence that would outlast them. Justice isn't loud, it's patient. She closed the case. Tomorrow there was a name, still on a list she carried in her head rather than on paper, because paper could be confiscated. A mole whose access logs suggested a pattern she had been mapping for 11 weeks. A pattern that terminated somewhere above the clearance level of everyone who had tried to stop her this morning. A surveillance still from a rooftop in Riyadh, blurred by distance, showing a figure in civilian clothes making contact with a source she had burned 2 years ago, who was supposed to be dead. Someone was still operating. The mission didn't end with corridors and salutes. It never did. The palms moved in the warm offshore wind, and the sky turned the color it turns before dark, and she watched it for exactly as long as it took the last of the orange to go. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to MVP Stories for more.